The main characteristic of Göbekli Tepe are these stone circles made of pillars, pillar-like megalithic stones with a height of 4 to 5 meters and a weight of 5 to 10 tons. So they are really megalithic stones, and they have a typical shape of a T form. And we can understand this form very well because some of the pillars have arms and fingers, hands and fingers. So we clearly can understand them as anthropomorphic, as human-shaped.
Animals are engraved on these human-shaped megaliths. Foxes, boars, serpents. A real zoo. Ian Hodder of Stanford University in San Francisco sees in this a significant shift in mindset.
There are lions and deer and cattle and also scorpions and spiders and all sorts of things. But these are on the human. And so the human has become central. And I think that is the most important shift that we see. Because it's only when humans become central to the natural world and become able to dominate animals that they can domesticate animals.
At Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists also found pieces of human statues. And in the nearby village of Urfa, they found a fully intact human statue almost 2 meters tall. It is the oldest one in the world. The Fertile Crescent hunter-gatherers had taken a great step forward. Previously, they had only depicted the animals they hunted and venerated. Now, Homo sapiens dared to represent himself. Man had become aware of his own power over nature. He venerated himself. Man had risen. It was the rise of man. Let's go back 9,500 years. In the Fertile Crescent, the modest hamlets had grown into large villages where hundreds of men and women lived. They still lived from hunting and gathering. The walls of houses were now made in bricks of raw clay, a material that is easy to handle. The architecture had changed. The houses were now rectangular.
Et ce changement tient au fait que les premiers paysans qui construisaient des maisons circulaires vivaient encore dans leur esprit, dans un contexte de sédentarité relative. Une maison circulaire, on ne peut pas trop l'agrandir, donc on est obligé de faire d'autres maisons circulaires, d'autres cases, d'autres pièces, exactement sur le même modèle. Au contraire, la maison quadrangulaire, on peut la découper, on peut l'agrandir en ajoutant de nouveaux cubes. Donc, peut-être qu'à ce moment-là, on passe d'un système qui était jusqu'à présent plutôt collectif à un système plutôt familial, avec une appropriation plus particulière de ce que l'on possède. Et donc, il faut toujours s'imaginer que derrière ces changements architecturaux, il y a à la fois des changements de mentalité et des changements de société.
The family was the social cell. The nuclear family and the extended family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. These families gathered together in tribes. Blood ties were important. To find a wife, no need to look elsewhere in another band. A mate could be living in the same village.
This is the major change. Instead of smaller sites that prevailed in the Paleolithic, you suddenly have your whole community living together. So it's the agglomeration, the clustering of all those wandering bands of hunters-gatherers that belong to your tribe, the people with whom you had communication over large distances in order to mate with them, suddenly they become all inhabitants in one place.
In the Near East, these villages multiplied. Some became quite large, such as Abu Huraira in Syria, Ain Kazal in Jordan, and Çatalhöyük in Turkey. Over 5,000 people lived there. The excavations helped to paint a surprising picture of the people of the time, of their activities and beliefs. Çatalhöyük, a village nestled in the heart of a region bountiful in plants, game, and fish. A village with a most unusual architecture. To access the houses, people had to go in via the roof, through the opening that served as a chimney. There were no streets. The inhabitants used ladders to go from one house to the next.
Çatalhöyük is simply a lot of houses, huge numbers of houses, all crammed together, and people moved around on the surfaces and they were on the roofs, and there were no public spaces. Between the houses there are sometimes areas of rubbish, but there were no public spaces.
Since 1993, Ian Hodder has led the excavations on the Çatalhöyük site. Oddly enough, his research found no indication of a social hierarchy. No palace, no single building more important than the others.
All the houses were very, very similar at Çatalhöyük because this was an egalitarian society. This was not a society where there was strong differences in status and wealth. And so we do not find, chiefly residences or palaces or anything like that. And this is quite common in societies of this type, ethnographically, that you tend to find there is a very strong taboo against certain people getting a lot of status that is more than other people.
Another find at Çatalhöyük, this statue of an obese woman. At her feet are two leopards. In archaeology, this statue is a virtual icon. Some see it as worshipping the goddess of motherhood, the goddess of fertility, of life. A goddess who dominates nature. Others see it differently.
In our own work there, what we found is that it's difficult to substantiate that particular idea. What we clearly see is that the image of women is very important, but we don't see any clear images of woman as the mother, and neither do we see the woman really as a goddess. So what we see is a powerful woman, but who has other attributes. And if we look at the rest of the symbolism at Çatalhöyük, what we see, for example, is a close link between women and death, that women are somehow associated with, as guardians of the dead. They look after the dead.
On the inside walls of the houses are drawings portraying wild animals. Leopards, vultures, and especially bulls' heads with their horns. A symbolic world of hunters, not farmers. And once again, this is surprising. For many archaeologists, a village like this, with so many people to feed, had to support itself through agriculture. However, excavation findings question this. For Ian Hodder, the inhabitants of Çatalhöyük were still basically living by hunting and gathering.
And so Çatalhöyük is at that point where, although domestication has occurred, in many parts of the Middle East, the domesticated plants and animals play a fairly minor role, and much of society is still very much based on wild resources. So even though they have domesticated plants and animals, this doesn't cause a huge change immediately. It's a gradual process. And really, social life at Çatalhöyük, it takes no notice at all of domesticated plants and animals.
Çatalhöyük shows that agriculture began very gently, without making waves. Quietly, inexorably, man's rapport with nature changed. He planted barley and wild wheat. In this evolving world, farming came into its own ever so slowly. The gatherer became a sower of seeds, one small act that would change the destiny of mankind. 9,000 years ago, the human population was growing. To feed themselves, some gave nature a hand. They decided to sow, all the better to reap. Here and there, wheat and wild barley fields appeared. Agriculture was born.
We also understand now that sedentism occurred a long time before domesticated plants and animals emerged. And so you can no longer say that, the domestication of plants and animals caused sedentism. And sedentism itself is a very, very long, slow process. So, in my view, rather than saying, there was a particular event, I think what you must understand is a long process where many, many things were taking place. And it was a particular conjunction of a whole series of things that came together in a fairly haphazard way that produced unexpectedly and without anyone trying to produce it, produced agriculture as a sort of accident.
These enhanced plants left the Fertile Crescent and were adopted by populations along the Euphrates. It was the beginning of a new lifestyle for many populations, until then unfamiliar with wheat and barley. The domestication of plants would occur all around the world. As if in response to a certain level of evolution, the hunter-gatherer faced an inevitability: agriculture.
Il y a d'autres berceaux du néolithique à travers le monde. Il n'y a pas eu une néolithisation dans le monde. Il y a plusieurs berceaux, plusieurs expériences, et ces expériences sont autonomes les unes des autres. Voyez. Donc, le Proche-Orient, c'est très bien, c'est la plus ancienne actuellement compte tenu des données chronologiques dont nous disposons, mais elle n'est pas unique, cette expérience-là. Il faut se rendre compte que cette expérience a été plurielle dans le monde, s'est réalisée dans des milieux écologiques différents et surtout dans des milieux culturels différents.
Fertile Crescent wheat and barley would spread throughout Europe to India. Rice and millet in China. Corn, potatoes, and peppers in America. Sorghum in Africa. The banana in New Guinea. To cultivate the land, man would cut down forests and open clearings. He set about cultivating his environment. To overcome drought, man made his first forays into irrigation in order to extend farming to dry lands. The landscapes became more human. Agriculture brought an end to the hunter-gatherer way of life. A more productive economy which could feed more people emerged. There was a population boom.
Avec l'agriculture, on peut produire autant qu'on veut et donc on peut nourrir autant de bouches qu'on a à nourrir. On a même intérêt parfois, on a besoin de bras pour cultiver, on a intérêt peut-être à avoir le plus de bras possible, donc la progression de la population est un avantage.
Les enfants à ce moment-là sont quand même plus faciles à élever parce qu'ils sont plus faciles à nourrir. On sait qu'on peut les nourrir, on en a d'autant plus volontiers. Le passage de quelques millions d'individus à quelques dizaines de millions d'individus se fait à ce moment-là et c'est le début de notre belle croissance démographique qui montre tout le succès de l'humanité.
Feeding more mouths meant producing more food. After crops, man turned to animals. Animal husbandry, the essential complement of farming, was the next logical step.
La domestication animale est intervenue apparemment plus tard, au Proche-Orient, dans le foyer le plus ancien, que la domestication des végétaux. Environ un millénaire et demi